So here we go. So it is February 11th, and here is our policy and action update. So the first thing is my ever cluttered chart. Got a new box right here, this little one. Oh, no, I'm skipping ahead. There has been the Ways and Means Committee is now beginning their hearing process. They already had their first one, and they're the one where Michael Bobbitt is the executive director of Mass Cultural Council will present their request to the legislature will be on March 1st. This is a virtual meeting. It is not open for public comments. You can watch, but Michael will be the only one who is allowed to speak. So that's just a quick little, here's where we are in the process. The other thing that I want to make sure everyone is aware of is that the Mass Cultural Council in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks has been gathering public comment for how to use or how to design a grant program for that $60 million that was allocated through the legislature's ARPA spending plan. Just some quick data points. More than 250 people attended the public forum that was held and co-hosted between Michael Bobbitt, the executive director, and Joanne Davis, who is the chair of the grants committee. And the agency received 300 pieces of written comment. That's incredible, right? Like that is a really fantastic part of our work, right? It's not just advocating to get the money, but it's participating in how to think about how to use that money. Right now, the agency staff is working to distill all that feedback. Obviously, there's a lot of it, so they're crunching through it. And they anticipate that they're going to share some of those data trends and key topics out to the public. The other thing to know is that they are trying to be very thoughtful about this money, but that means that it may not be turned around very quickly, right? So we'll see how that kind of continues to move. But that just good work, guys. Good work. Nice advocating. That is important. The other piece before I dig into our topic for today is that the New England Museum Association, or NEMA for short, is hosting an advocacy camp next week. NEMA and Meg Winnicates, who heads up their advocacy work, is fantastic. So they are a regional organization, but they have some really great skills and tools and teachers, and you should consider attending if you have the opportunity. You don't have to be a museum person, however you want to define that, to attend and benefit, and it's free to attend. So please consider being part of advocacy camp. We wholeheartedly give NEMA's advocacy work and that camp, we're going to be checking in and being a part of it too, because we really love them and they think they do excellent work. Okay, so today we are going to talk about advocating for local ARPA funding, right? This is a big deal. And it is a place that can be super confusing because we are talking about more than 300 cities and towns in Massachusetts who all have their own style of government. They all have their own individual people, and they all have their own individual arts and cultural communities. But I'm taking the time now because I think it's really useful to just reset us, remind us of what is available and why it is absolutely allowed for the local communities to use American Rescue Plan Act funding that they received to address the losses to the arts and cultural community, right? So a lot of money, right? There's $2 billion of aid that's going to cities and towns across Massachusetts. That's not including the $946 million that went to county governments. And in some cases that don't have sort of governing functioning city governments, that money just went directly to the cities and towns that are within those county governments. Suffolk County is one of those, right? So Boston got an additional piece of money from that. Barnstable County is not. So they are a county government. They are actually thinking about spending priorities for that, right? So there's two methods here. Okay. Here's the deadlines. So city and towns have until December 31st of 2024 to decide how they're going to spend that money. And then they have to spend it by December 31st of 2026. Okay. So that means that some people are taking different approaches to this. We don't want to make our plans. We have lots of time. We want to make our plans right now and set up programs that are going to last through 2026. Let's go, right? And we're seeing this happen in a couple of different places. Boston yesterday, Mayor Wu announced or actually this week, right, announced 2 uses for some of that ARPA funding. One is around providing free bus lines to 3 specific bus lines in Massachusetts, or excuse me, Boston, providing free bus fare. And then the other one is actually specific money that is going to artists and arts communities through the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, right? We're also seeing other coverage that some governments are saying, whoa, 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 we're not ready. We're not going to do it yet. Okay. So know that. So here's the big question, because already for the last, I would say, since the bill was signed, I have heard from folks who are hearing from their local governments that are saying, you can't use ARPA dollars for arts and cultural recovery. And the answer is, absolutely you can. You absolutely can. They absolutely can. And there is so much guidance out there that is telling them that they can. So let's break that down. There are, I'm skipping wildly ahead. Let's see. So there are like 4 main criteria for how you can think about using that money. The first one is the one we're really going to dig into, which is respond to the far-reaching public health and negative economics of the pandemic by supporting the health of communities, helping households recover from the economic impacts, helping small businesses, impacted industries, nonprofits, and the public sector recover from economic impacts, right? You notice that I've highlighted some of those. The difference in highlighting color is a clerical error on my part. Please do not read into it. But the point is that our industry has been absolutely impacted. We have the data to tell that story. It doesn't have to just go to nonprofits. It doesn't just have to go to businesses, right? When we're talking about the impacted industry, workers are a part of that conversation, right? So this is absolutely a use of that funding. And then the U.S. Treasury, which is the group, right, the agency, the federal agency that it takes the bill that Congress passed and that Biden signed and writes out the guidelines. They go further, right? And they talk about, right, these are the eligible uses of funds to address the economic hardship. I'm going to skip to the last one. Assistance to tourism, travel, and hospitality and other impacted industries, right? So many of our organizations and efforts and programs align directly with the tourism and travel industries, right? So when you're thinking about making the case and when you're thinking about approaching local electeds and officials and saying, like, they are calling out that there needs to be assistance to tourism, travel, and hospitality. As you are thinking about that strategy, remind them how core arts and culture are to so much of tourism, travel, and hospitality in Massachusetts, right? We've itemized a number of other pieces of this about like how cities can use that money. And we have a link, I'm sure it's up now, where if you're like me and you just love reading a very dense document, you can pour through it and really look through the minutia of that. But these are sort of the big headlines. So now we're going to move on to making the case, right? So the first obstacle you ran into is you can't use that money for arts and cultural recovery. And we've already answered that question. So now we want to talk about making the case, because there are a lot of really good uses for this money. And I'm not going to pretend that they don't have merit and they don't have value. Well, arts and culture has merit and value too. So there have been a couple of efforts to think about sort of broader key messaging that really lands with folks who may not have already sort of like joined in had that revelatory moment where they bought into arts and culture, right? So these messaging pieces that we're going to take a look at are ones that really connect with folks based on the language that we're choosing and the approach we're taking, right? So the first one is we know that arts, culture, and creativity promote interaction with people and reduce social isolation and build stronger relationships, right? Like, we're all thinking about how we're going to emerge, quote unquote, from the pandemic. And if I'm a local leader, I'm thinking about, like, how do I hold my community together? And arts and culture are a core of that. Okay, arts and culture elevates diverse voices and perspectives. It celebrates local culture and it tells the story of the people and places in the community, right? If you invest in local culture, you are investing in your people. So that's an important message here. And it's also an important message because so much of our conversations, really important conversations over the last 3 years have been about not just the impact of COVID-19, but the disproportionate impact on historically underinvested, publicly underinvested communities. And there's real merit in thinking about how arts and culture can be, if we work at it, part of that change in elevating voices that are often left out of the conversation, right? And so if we're thinking about bringing communities together, we want to do that too. By creating jobs in every city and town, and these don't have to be like straight up like, you know, there's a theater and those jobs are arts jobs. When that theater has a big renovation, the people, the contractors who come in to work on that big renovation become arts jobs, right? So we're creating ripple effects and jobs here, okay? The arts and cultural industry can drive economic revitalization, increase property values, and reverse the brain drain, right? Because it's saying like, here are opportunities for you to stay and be part of our community to young people. More along these lines is pride of place, right? Like we know that arts and culture, local arts and culture, create the kinds of communities that people are proud to call home because it's reflective of them, right? And it's also part of where young people say like, hey, I'm not going to just leave and, you know, I'm not going to take off. I'm going to like reinvest in my community, right? And if I'm a local elected official, I want to think about that. Finally, this goes straight to that tourism argument, right? It doesn't matter if it's Greenfield, Massachusetts or Lynn, Massachusetts. Art activity draws people to the town. They spend those dollars. They power local businesses, and they bring, you know, they raise the profile of the city and the community, right? Oftentimes, I think the argument becomes, well, that's just Main Street and that's just downtown. But that's not thinking about the whole, right? Because when you bring people to your downtown and you invest in those small businesses and you elevate the profile of the community, the neighborhood right next door benefits too, right? Because those people are in that community and they're spending money and keeping jobs in that community, right? So to say that by investing in a cultural block, you're not actually investing in the whole city is missing the point a little bit here. All right, so those are 5 key frameworks. We've also included some links for if you really want to dig into more of those frameworks, that might be helpful. So now I want to talk about building support. This is something that we got to do all the time, right? And just like when you're doing, you know, sending out your emails to get people to come see your shows, or sharing on social media the newest art project that you've worked on, we have to activate the people who already care about our work to care about our recovery, right? So think about how you can activate all of those networks on all of those email lists or all of your followers to engage and raise this issue, right? Activate them. And you don't have to be mean about it. You don't have to be pushy about it, but you can say like, you care about us. You care about my artistic practice. You've bought pieces of mine. Here's something that we really need to see happen so that I can stay here and make more art, right? So the other piece is that there are so many allies and champions that we have to like uncover and build relationships with. So think about like in your dealings, are there city councilors who've shown up at your events time and time again, who you have good relationships with? Check in with them, say, hey, how is this going? Say, we're hitting a roadblock. Also say to them, what are the roadblocks you are hitting and how can we as advocates help you be the champion of this issue? The same thing is there are a lot of dedicated municipal arts staff, whether they are, and sorry for the typo, whether they're actually called like the arts planner or they're called like the the head of arts and culture. They come under a lot of titles. And while they may not be able to like directly advocate with you, oftentimes they can sort of help you with data, with case making, and they can also sort of say to you like, here's what I'm hearing. Like, again, we need your help to provide that healthy, positive pressure to make these things happen. Showing up makes a difference. And I know this is the hardest one, and I'm not going to pretend that there aren't real economic and personal barriers that make it impossible to attend an in-person town meeting or public committee meeting. But those make the biggest difference. When you have a lot of people walk in, we're seeing it on the news for issues that we may not agree with. A lot of people are showing up and are talking and about something they care about, and it's elevating the issue, right? We need to do that too. And it's not just about showing up and doing that once. It's like, how do you become the person who is able to sit in on the virtual public meeting and live tweet it to say like, hey, here's what's happening. Like, they're not talking about the arts, or they are, and there seems to be this roadblock. We've got to move on this, right? Use your channels to amplify the message, okay? And then finally, do not give up. I'm going to remind you, cities and towns have until the end of 2024 to make their decisions on how to spend their money, and they have until 2026 to spend that money. So if the first answer you get is no, that's not the last answer. Somebody in fundraising who I just love once said that when someone says no, they're usually saying not right now. And I think we need to apply that approach in this moment, right? That doesn't mean we have to be, pushy about it or jerks about it. We can be firm, we can be respectful, but we're not going to give up. And that is my last slide. Just a quick reminder, we will be back in 2 weeks on the 25th, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen briefly and see if there are any questions, just really quickly. Dan, yes. So you can think, well, that's a logistical question. I'm going to bring, okay. Sorry. Okay. So Rachel asks, are these deadlines apply to the MCC decision making? No. So that's a different piece, right? Like they will have until 2026 to spend that money, and they do have 2024 to decide. But I gather that their intention is not to do that. We know we have an arts agency that is extremely responsive to the field. So when I'm talking about those deadlines, I'm really talking about when we're talking about local allocation dollars, right? The other piece that I saw, somebody asked me privately, has anyone heard updates on the NEA ARPA funding? Yeah, they released all that money. So if you go to the NEA website, you can see that they have made their grant announcements, both for the sub-granting as well as for the direct grants. And someone asked me privately, but I think it's important. So there's somebody already shared this article with me, is that there seems to be a little fight in New Bedford, right? Between a very supportive mayor and city council that's asking some pretty tough questions, and is maybe not quite ready to say yes to what to me looks like a profoundly amazing investment in the creative economy in New Bedford. And this is a place where, Mass Creative has already reached out to say like, hey, can we help? But it's also I think it's pretty telling, right? Like, how are we all building? New Bedford arts leaders are phenomenal at building that case. And they've got a steep road ahead of them, but they also have an amazing support network of audiences and members who I would imagine are ready to go to bat for, to say to city councilors, like, this is something we care about and we do want to see happen, right? But I think it's a good point that we need to constantly engage. We can't take for granted that just because we have a supportive city manager or a supportive city mayor, that it will happen, right? Okay, I am going to end us for today. Everything that we covered today is published in a handy dandy little guide on our website. We have the link in the chat, and feel free to share that. The other thing is that we went through this information pretty quickly. And if you have like specific triage questions, please feel free to reach out to me or G. I think you have our email addresses. On Monday, you can expect to get a review email, a follow-up email that will have that guide and will have my email address. So if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us. It is great to see all of you. Have a wonderful day.